All right, it is January 28th, 2021. It is the 35th anniversary of the Challenger space shuttle disaster. And just like any other event like that, I'm fasting to memorialize the loss of 7 astronauts 35 years ago today. And I often hear about events where people will remember where they were when they happened. And often Space Shuttle Challenger is one of them. And it makes me realize how lucky that generation of people were that an event like don't get me wrong, it was a tragedy, but it's a relatively minor tragedy compared to the ones that I've seen in my lifetime, right? When I think about events where I remember where I was, let's see. My earliest one was probably when I was in second grade. I remember one day while I was in school, one morning, one of the other teachers had gone into our classroom and was whispering to my teacher, and both of them were on the verge of tears. And the rest of the day, our teacher was very sad. And she didn't tell us what was going on at the time because obviously we were too young to be listening to that kind of news. And it wasn't until later that I got home that my parents told me that there had been a bombing in Oklahoma. And even then, I didn't know what bombing really meant, right? I just knew that a lot of people had died and there was a lot of wreckage. Oh, that's the extent that I knew it as at the time. I was 8 years old at the time. I wasn't alive when Challenger exploded, by the way. Um, okay. 5 years after that, we were preparing for Y2K. And I remember at the time, it seemed like when the clock hit 12 on Y2K, everything would stop working, right? We wouldn't be able to connect to the internet. Um, ATMs would stop working. Your credit cards would stop working. Um, airplanes wouldn't fly anymore. Your car wouldn't start anymore. It just seemed like that, right? Anything that had a clock on it would potentially break down, right? And that didn't seem to bother me, though. Uh, you got to remember, this was 21 years ago when you weren't attached to your electronics, right? You were attached to your neighborhood and your friends, and physically, right? Kind of weird now. 21 years later, it's the other way around, right? Going to see somebody physically is really dangerous, and spending 24 hours a day on the screen is perfectly acceptable, right? It was the other way around back in 2000, or at least it was closer to the other way around. I realized there were already people who were like that. Not to mention how slow everything was when you connected online. I remember years ago, I used to love to play chess on Yahoo Games. And a typical game on there could last an hour, 2 hours, right? Nowadays we have blitz games, right? Because our internet can support that. Now, I remember we hoarded a lot of food, canned food. See, we were actually smarter back then. We didn't hoard toilet paper. Right? We actually hoarded food, freeze-dried food and all that. But I was 12 years old. I didn't know why we were doing that. I thought the reason we were doing that was to celebrate. When Y2K finally hit, we're going to just have a big festival of some sort, right? Now, my mom was 8 months pregnant with my brother at the time. And so that kind of took my mind off of all the drama of Y2K as well. And then finally it hit, and I the year before Y2K, I had learned how to program in Java, and I was relieved to see my Java still working after 12, and I decided to write a computer program to tell us if the next year was the next millennium was going to be luckier or less lucky than the last millennium. So I wrote a computer program to generate a bunch of random numbers, kind of like how I love to fortune tell with rolling 10 dice nowadays, right? And so I generated 10 random numbers from 1 through 10, and I don't remember what I rolled. That's how silly it was. But at the time, I had just started learning how to program, and that seemed like a very high-tech program to me. And that was that. And I remember after Y2K hit, it was like we had a fresh start on everything, right? The first time I ever do this, the first time I ever do that. And I remember after Y2K hit, kind of feeling like the need to get good grades after that, right? I was 13 years old because I didn't want to ruin the new millennium with a bad grade, right? And so that was good. It kind of gave me a fresh start. Now, unfortunately, a year and a half later, we had a major tragedy, right? At this point, I was going to college part-time, if you can believe it. And one morning, my mom and I were at the financial aid department, and there was a lot of distraction there. We had been waiting there for quite a while. And then one of my former professors walks by and says, "Did you see what happened on the news?" And we hadn't. That's how focused I was on my studies at the time. I didn't even know what was going on around me. And he said that 2 planes had crashed into the World Trade Center. And we thought, well, that's a tragic accident. We didn't think it was terrorism at the time. And he said, "No, it's no accident. It's 2 airplanes." Now, I had known about how there had been a truck bombing at the World Trade Center 8 years before that, and I thought he was talking of when he started with there was a bombing at the World Trade Center, and I thought, oh, I know about that. Is it the anniversary today? That's what I thought when he said it, and he says, no, it happened today, and that's when we realized that was what everybody at the financial aid office was glued to at the time. And what was really interesting is that later that afternoon, as we were going home, obviously the rest of the classes for that day were canceled. As we were going home, my mom went to a Joann fabric store, probably to take her mind off of that. I have that habit too. When I hear something dramatic, we'll get to that later. Actually, there was another dramatic story where I tried to take my mind off of it with something familiar, right? It happens. I think that's a part of the reason why a lot of people are hoarding toilet paper. Now, the reason I say that, when people say that Challenger is like a flashbulb memory, I find that to be a sign that there weren't too many troubles going on. See, in my generation, we had one just like that, where we had the Columbia explosion. That hardly makes a blip in terms of things that I remember what I was doing when they happened, right? I kind of remember it. It was a Saturday morning, and I had woken up really early that morning. What was really coincidental was that I used to love to watch Unsolved Mysteries, and one of my favorite segments of Unsolved Mysteries was when they would talk about UFOs. And that morning, I had just been watching an episode of Unsolved Mysteries about UFOs, and I was thinking, oh my god, I hope I never see one. I don't know why. I used to have a big fear if I go out at night that I would look up in the sky and I would see a UFO. I used to have a big fear of that. And I kind of funny because now that I actually like to look at the night sky, sometimes I do see UFOs. One time I saw about 10 or 20 satellites, like in succession, one after another. And I don't think we have any satellite program that operates like that, so I'm not sure if that was a UFO. One of my favorite things to do to look for UFOs is I'll calculate. Imagine if aliens were trying to fly from some other planet to some other, let's say from Venus to Mars or from Venus to Jupiter. Now, sometimes there are flight times that would fly past Earth and help with reducing the delta V's of that trip. And I'll calculate when they need to fly past Earth and then go out to look for them. But I've never caught a UFO that way. It's more of a curiosity. It's not likely we have life anywhere out there. but from another star system possibly. I need to calculate. I've never calculated this before. If somebody wants to fly from Proxima Centauri and wants to gain speed flying through the solar system, when they would have to fly past Earth, right? If I could calculate that, I would probably have a better chance of catching a UFO. But I had big fears of that, and that morning I was thinking about the potential of seeing a UFO, and then I turned on the news, and then Columbia had exploded. And that's the extent I remember that memory as. Now, in 2006, I was dealing with severe eczema. I was very ill that year. And then I turned on the news, and there had been a bombing. I can't even remember which bombing it was. Was it the 7/7? I remember one of the bombings happened when I was really ill, and it took my mind off of my eczema. I mean, yes, it's a tragedy that there had been a bombing, but that's the extent I remember it. And see, that's why I say people are lucky when they say Challenger was such a pivotal event in their memories. Okay, fast forward a couple years, 2008, I'm working on my PhD. And I had just started collecting coins at a professional level, right? Or technically not coins, it was mostly bullion. Now, one morning, I had rode my bicycle to the coin shop, and the coin shop that I love to go to, they had this wall with all the prices of all the precious metals, and I noticed, oh my god, prices had crashed. And I thought this was a great buying opportunity. And so I browsed some silver coins. I was comparing which one would give me the better deal with silver. And I naively thought I could use my credit card at the coin shop. And the coin dealer just gave me this really funny look when I handed him my credit card. And he was like, we only take cash here. And I thought that was weird. It had been a long time since I had used cash. But I really liked the deal. I didn't know if that low silver price was going to last. And so I rode my bicycle another few miles to go to a bank to withdraw the cash. And by the time I got back to the coin shop and paid for the coins and then rode my bicycle back to the campus, I was exhausted. But I was so relieved I got the silver at the good deal. The price had crashed like a $2 or $3, like in the space of 24 hours, if I remember correctly. And I get back to the campus, and now I'm bragging to my PhD advisor about how I had scored such a deal on silver. I was very immature at the time, to be honest. I was bragging about that. And my advisor gave me this dirty look and told me, "Did you hear what happened on the news today?" And I said, "No, what happened?" And she exclaimed that the economy is crashing and the government had to bail out these corporations. And even then, I didn't understand what was going on. I was just really pleased that I was going to get silver at such a good deal because of the economy crashing. I love it when I get to take advantage of a disaster, because while other people are suffering, the suffering doesn't seem to apply to me, and I just feel very high off of that when there's a problem and it doesn't apply to me. I love that feeling. In Chinese, we have a proverb of what it means to take advantage of a bad situation. We call it 趁火打劫. Looting a burning house. And that was my first major experience with 趁火打劫. Now, 12 years later, I got to practice the same thing again. See, at the beginning of 2020, we had heard that there had been a virus halfway around the world, and it had killed a few hundred people. But that wasn't the first time we heard something like that, right? We've had Ebola, we've had SARS, we've had swine flu and bird flu, and it didn't really seem like a big deal. Now, when it started to become a big deal was in late January. I was applying for a job at a tutoring center, and while I was applying for it, and I got an interview, the manager there said to bring my passport to the interview. And I thought that was weird. I've never had to bring a passport during an interview. So I get to the interview and he checks my passport, but he's not looking at the photo. He's looking at the visa stamp pages. Yeah, so, well, that's interesting. He said he wanted to make sure I hadn't been to so-and-so countries in the last few weeks because there's a virus there. That's when it started to become a little bit more serious than the bird flu and the swine flu and all that. Still didn't think much of it. And then a few months later, a little bit over a month later, I had gone to my favorite coffee shop, and I noticed that they had put tape over every other seat. And there was this new buzzword. We needed to practice social distancing. And I remember thinking, well, that's a good thing because I have food allergies. I always have to warn people who sit next to me, when they're eating, not to dust their hands everywhere because I react badly to milk products. And I remember, well, that's a good thing. And so that went on for a few days. And then all of a sudden, we couldn't even sit down in the coffee shop anymore. And I turned on the news, and I learned that a number of cities had closed down their economy. The stock market was crashing. And all of a sudden, the price of silver dropped from $17, I think, down to a low of $12 or $11. And I wanted to take advantage of that market again. But all the coin shops were closed, obviously. And the online coin dealers, they were jammed up with orders. And I spent the rest of that day browsing. And again, I naively thought I could just order, a few hundred ounces of silver. And it took me a few days of getting on the phone. But I got the order in, but they needed to confirm a bunch of stuff, because there had been a lot of fraud. So I had to fax in some tax returns, some utility bills. But it was well worth it. I got a very good deal out of the silver. Now, the first day of that lockdown, you got to remember, I used to live out of my car a lot. And I was living out of my car at the time. And I frantically checked into an Airbnb. And I got a very good deal out of it because obviously nobody was using Airbnb for traveling, right? So I got a good deal out of it. So on March 19th, I checked into the Airbnb and I started writing an AI for the game of backgammon. I was planning on competing in the Computer Olympiad again in 2020, but of course it's been canceled. And the online events were kind of a flop because it was hard to get everybody together. You got people from different time zones. I started writing an AI for the game of backgammon, and I named you got to remember, this was back when we were only supposed to lock down a couple of weeks. I named the game Corona Gammon because it was going to be a game that I wrote during this 2 or 3 week vacation that we were all forced to take. And I remember thinking that while we're practicing social distancing, maybe I'll use it to tell people that this is a great idea for people with allergies, and maybe we need to be more mindful anyway, whether or not we have a virus. I got 2 or 3 weeks to teach people that. Little did I know it was going to be more like 2 or 3 years, right? So there's been positives and negatives. Anyways, it's the 35th anniversary of Challenger. If you were alive back then, feel free to leave a comment about what you were doing at the time. And I'm going to be fasting. I hope to fast all the way until February 1st when we have the anniversary of Columbia as well. But that's a little bit of a stretch. We'll see. Thanks for watching.